welcome to In the News for September 5, 2025. I am Brett Birdie from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett.
Jeff, we are just a few days away from a huge announcement on Tuesday, September 9th. I can't wait until next Friday, to be honest with you, even though I know you and I are going to talk probably several times between now and then because of the Apple announcement happening on September 9th. But before we get to that, I just want to highlight a beautiful post that you did today or this week. It was just a couple of days ago. That was something that I think we've mentioned before on some of the podcasts. Every year, there is something that I've listened to for many, many years now. So it's kind of special to me. This is the Relay Podcast Network, where several other great technology podcasts are hosted. And every year you can maybe tell a little bit of the story behind it, but they do a marathon or a fundraiser for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And that in itself is amazing. I've donated in the past. I know that you do because you're very open about it. It is a wonderful thing to donate. But I smiled so big this week because you put an extra additional incentive if people donated what I think it was, you put it at $100, that they could get the one and only coveted iPhone JD micro cleaning cloth, which I'm holding up mine right now because I still use it every day, just like you said that you do. I remember receiving this at an ABA tech show. I mean, it had to be 12 years ago, something like that, Jeff. It was a long time ago. Anyway, thanks for posting this and raising a little bit of awareness and even donating your last few remaining micro cleaning cloths. And these were like cool before there was even micro cloths, Jeff. Like this was the first one that I even knew about. And I was so happy to see that you posted about it this week.
There you go. Well, first, Brett, thank you for starting the podcast with this because you always pick our lineup, and this is a great one to start with. September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. That's been true for a very long time. And, you know, of all the things that you're going to want to, you know, nobody likes cancer. And I mean, the worst possible cancer is cancer in kids. I mean, this is a no-brainer of a cause. Everybody's in favor of it, especially because it's done so much good. I mean, ever since St. Jude was founded by Danny Thomas, the famous actor, you know, father of Marlo Thomas and stuff, that, you know, when he founded it, you know, they have the statistics that childhood cancer was basically a complete death sentence. And since then, with all the advancements that have been made through science, now, you know, they can do so many kids do great afterwards, you know, and so it's just a fundamental change. And St. Jude is one of many organizations. They treat kids that are there in Memphis, but they also do research and share it throughout the world and help everybody. So, I mean, not to be political, but especially this day and age when people are attacking science at the highest level of U.S. government, why not be a part of helping science to help people, to help kids? I mean, it's just a no-brainer. So Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, something we should all worry about. And years ago, the Relay network of podcasts, which we're not a part of, but they started saying, well, you know, let's raise money for it. And for the first few years, they did it themselves and they had great results. And then years ago, they said, well, you know, we're going to branch it out. And so anyone can be a part of it. So I'm like, okay, I'll make iPhone JD a part of it. And so the idea is like have everybody, you know, if you've got your little, you know, website about football teams, you can raise money through your group. And for us, the people that listen to this podcast or read iPhone JD. And when the thing that's awesome is that when people come together, I mean, if you want to give hundreds of dollars, that's great. If you want to give $25, that's fine too. You know, if everybody gives a little of something, it really adds up. And I know that sounds trite because people say that all the time, but I was amazed that this effort has now raised over like $4 million over the years, just from a bunch of people that have an interest in technology, just everybody giving a little something. I mean, we're talking about real research that this can fund real helping kids. So it's a no-brainer of a cause. So to encourage people to give money, they have these incentives, and St. Jude provides incentives too. I mean, if you give a certain amount of money, they say it can go towards, you know, having a party for kids. You know, that makes you feel good about that. Through the Relay network, you can say, well, you know, if I give a certain amount of money, I want to get like a free screensaver that's put together. And those are always sort of fun and cute, or stickers or something like that. But they say, you know, come up with something of your own too. And so what I did, I think last year, and I'm doing it again, is way back when there used to be this company called Mobile Cloth, which they made
Yes.
fantastic, as you were just saying, I literally have one in front of my computer that I use just to clean my glasses,
Me
to clean my
too.
iPhone and my iPad screen. And so I had made a whole bunch of them because they had this program that you could brand them with like your logo. In fact, I have some with my old law firm logo on it too. We now have a new logo, but anyway, so I had some made with the iPhone JD logo. You have a picture of it behind you,
Yep.
and I had a bunch of them made. I don't know how many I had, 200 or something like that. And so I would give them out at, conferences and stuff just to like, why not? I don't have many of them left. I wish I had more. I really do. I would love
Me
to make more.
too.
I keep looking for, I mean, it's not like the technology of making a good microcloth
Right.
is,
Right.
this is not curing cancer, so to speak. But I have yet to find another company that makes cloths that are so soft and so good. And I get them all the time. In fact, just the other day, I got a new pair of eyeglasses and I got like a little lens cleaner
Yeah.
that's still on my desk here.
It's
And
not as good.
it's no,
It's
it
not as
sucks. It's
good.
not as good. So these
Yeah.
are good quality things. It happens to have the iPhone JD logo on it. There ain't many left of them. I don't know how many I've got left. Not many,
Not a
but
lot left.
I
Collector's
found it.
item.
I found 10 of them. And so I said, I'm setting these 10 aside. And so anyway, so if you decide to give $100, you can get one of those. But, don't do it for the lens cloth, although that's a good reason to do it. Do it
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
helping kids and you're helping science and everything else. So we just started this week and, I put a goal of $1,000 in there. Hopefully a bunch of people come together. And I think last year,
Let's bust it.
people
Yeah.
people gave more than 1,000. I ended up raising it even further. So but thank you for starting the podcast
Awesome.
today. I hope that
Yeah.
everybody listens. It's
Yeah.
so easy. Just like you click a button and you put in your credit card. It takes like 15 seconds and you can give some
Yeah.
money. You can feel good. Maybe get a lens cloth, all good.
I literally, this is one of the 2 cloths that I carry in my bag just because it was so good. But I fondly remember, however many years that was, we were at one of the Taste of Tech Show dinners after
Yeah,
the
yeah.
show, after one of the days of the show, Jeff. And I mean, I hadn't known you maybe for a year or two, but I was always so impressed and I wanted to go and have dinner with you just because I know we could talk about iPhone stuff all the time.
Yes,
And
we
you
did.
had these, and I'm like, these are great. And again, today microcloths are just all over the place. But as you point out, they're not as good and the quality. And this is why I kind of keep this one. I've even put it and washed it a few times because I
Oh
know
yeah,
that I've used
absolutely.
it.
Yeah, you can.
I've used it so much that it's like I know there's got to be some grime that's in there. But this is one of the first ones that I remember having, before all of the other, microcloths. Anyway, just a good thing. And if that helps to give you a little bit more of an incentive to donate to a fantastic cause, I just wanted to make sure that we pointed that out. Today. So thanks for posting about that, Jeff. All right. So let's get back then to the Apple announcement, which is going to be happening in just a few days. And I know we talked about this. In fact, let me bring up the page here. This is apple.com/apple-events. So you can see the little glowing apple that I played with for 15 minutes last week where I was moving my mouse around. It's really fun that you can go in and you can play with that. This is September 9th. That's next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And we were talking about this Apple logo because every year when Apple has these events, they come out with some kind of a cryptic looking, but oh so very cool logo for that particular event. And I'm so happy that you found this story from this week. A brief history of the iPhone event, every keynote invitation, and the secrets they revealed. This was so fun to walk through.
I love it. People talk about criminology, trying to read things from a picture and stuff. And so Apple comes up with, it's a cute little logo, now we have the glowing logo and a
Yep.
tagline. And of course, the tagline for next week is awe dropping. And so who knows what that means. And so it was great to see, by the way, this post is fantastic. But it's not all of all of Apple's teasers because these are just the teasers for the iPhone event. Of course, they have iPad events and Mac events and stuff like that.
Good point.
And so if you look historically, over the years, many times the teaser slogan is just, in retrospect, we can say, well, that was just something fun to say, but sometimes either the picture or the tagline is after the fact, you're like, oh, now I know what they were referring to. It was sort of a tease. It was sort of a preview. And so in this post, there's tons of great ones in here. But I noticed, for example, well, first of all, this is not a tease, but the original iPhone introduction, which was not a special iPhone event. It was when they still had the Macworld conferences. It was the Macworld San Francisco in January of 2007. A lot of people thought Apple was going to announce a smartphone. We weren't sure. And then the tagline was the first 30 years were just the beginning. And,
Wow.
again, that doesn't necessarily tell you what's coming, but it just looks so forward thinking, because anyone who talks about the history of Apple nowadays, it really is, yes, the Mac was important and that's what put them on the Mac after the Apple II, but it's pre-iPhone and post-iPhone, right? I mean, you could,
Right.
in a bigger
Right.
picture, you might say the same thing about the
Absolutely.
iPod, because that was part of it. And you could even, give credit to the iMac in the late 90s when Apple was on the brink of bankruptcy. But the iPhone increased Apple's profitability, their presence in the world. It's the device that everybody used. I mean, right now it's still, 50% of their sales. And so it's true that the first 30 years of Apple in the big picture was just setting the stage for the iPhone Apple. So I thought that was good. Another interesting that jumped out at me was in the year 2013. That's when the
Let me go down
slogan
there.
was brighten everyone's day. And you're like
Ooh,
writing
I remember
everybody's
that.
day with some color
Yeah.
pictures with those circles. But that was the year that they came out with the iPhone 5C, which was interesting because it
Oh,
was a
that was the
lower end
colorful one. Yeah.
iPhone. Right. I mean, they
Yeah.
would eventually come up with the SE, and nowadays they have the what is it, the E model. But the idea of it's an iPhone that doesn't have the latest greatest features, so it's going to be cheaper, but it's going to be a little bit more mass appeal. And the thing about the 5C was that the back of it was sort of like this, plasticky sort of thing that could be like a bright color. I remember that my grandmother got one that was
Yeah.
like a bright red. I mean, it was very stunning looking. And so you had some really cool pictures. And so, yes, it did brighten everybody's day. So in retrospect, we know what they were referring to. Yeah, look at your showing right there, that cool blue
Yeah.
one and
Yeah. A
stuff like
couple of the
that.
colors.
Great,
Yeah.
great, great colors. One more I'll mention that was a little bit of a preview was in 2020. They had the
Oh,
one that was
2020. Okay.
high, speed, high speed or high speed. And that was the one where the
There it
iPhone
is. Yeah.
had 5G modems for the first time. And so the idea is, now the irony is, we all know that 5G can be really fast. Now there's actually sometimes that the 4G LTE can be just as fast. It depends. But
Right.
still, that was one that, in retrospect, you're like, oh, I see what they were winking at. That's what they were referring to. Many of them don't
Right.
have it. And for the one for next week, awe dropping, I think it's just because it's a cute phrase. But so anyway, it's
It
always
is
fun.
cute.
We have to speculate about things. We've heard all the rumors. I feel like we've heard so many rumors about next week that it almost makes me concerned that there's not going to be anything
That there
surprising,
won't
right?
be surprise. I
We want to
know.
be
I
surprised.
know.
When Apple announces the super thin iPhone as perhaps as like a one more thing at the end, we're going to all be like, yeah, we knew this was coming because of all the leaks. So hopefully they will surprise us and there will be some fun things. I will say, just this is a personal note between you and me, Brett. If anybody else wants to listen, that's fine. Brett, you and I often will sort of text each other during the iPhone announcements and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
I have, most of my practice as an appellate lawyer. I have a big appellate oral argument that starts right at 1 p.m. Central on next Tuesday.
No.
So I'll be getting ready for it. So like as I'm getting ready for oral argument,
You got
going
to
to the
call the
court,
judge.
it'll be going
We
on,
need to postpone
it's a 3-judge panel, and so I will be catching up
all
afterwards.
three.
I will have the oral argument. Hopefully it will go well. I'll be talking to my client afterwards, and then I'm going to be opening up my browser like, so what happened today? So anyway, I'm sure I'll be watching the
You'll
announcement
be,
that night. But don't be
counsel,
texting
what are
me
you looking
during
at
the
right now?
presentation, Brett, because I'll be giving my oral argument to the court. And I'm
Okay.
like, excuse me,
Okay.
Your Honor, I'm looking at my Apple Watch. Brett
Sorry.
wanted to say, look at that. I don't, please don't do that. But anyway.
Your Honor, this is all dropping. We have to stop. Can we ask for a recess, please? We have very important. Good. Okay. It was so fun to go through this, and I'm so glad this was from Macworld. I had to scroll all the way back up to see who wrote this up, which was Alex Blake. That was so great. That 2007, the image at the very top is Steve Jobs in 2007 showing, and I so remember this, Jeff, that before he actually revealed the actual device, the iPhone. He's like, we have an iPod, it's a phone, and the internet. The iPod, phone, internet. He like repeated it 3 or 4 times and just got everybody hyped up. And then he presented it.
Are you getting it? These are not 3 different
are you
devices.
getting it? Exactly.
This is one device, and we are calling it iPhone. The best keynote
Just so
presentation
fun.
of Apple's history was that 2007 keynote. Yeah.
All right, we're not going to speculate too much more on what's going to be happening because, frankly, we already have. But I thought this was another good, quick article in 9 to 5 Mac about the favorite security or privacy features. This is from Arin Waichulis, and I just thought it was good. I feel like we have addressed a few of these before, but again, I feel like we can't mention them enough because I am very excited to see a couple of these, I feel like, oh yeah, this is a no-brainer. I can't wait. And another one or two, I'm like, I got to see how this is going to act in the real world first.
Yeah, no, there's some good ones in here. No, this is iOS 26. So even if you don't buy a new iPhone, you will be able to take advantage of most, if not all of these. Some of them are
Right,
things that
right.
have been very obvious marquee features for added privacy. I'll tell you the biggest one for me, Brett, call screening. You have it in the screen too. You were thinking the
Boom.
same thing
Right.
because ever since WWDC in June of this year, when Apple previewed that this was coming out, every single time I get like a spam text message, I think to myself, oh, I cannot
I
wait for
can't
iOS
wait.
26
I can't.
because then this is not going to interrupt me. It's going to be put
Right.
away. Oh, I cannot wait. So that's one that we all know about. But this post also mentioned a few that some of which I did not know about, or maybe I did and I forgot about. Like one of them was called advanced fingerprinting. And no, we're not talking about your
Yes.
thumb. What we're talking
Not the
about is
fingerprint. Yeah.
Apple tries to protect you as you're using your iPhone or iPad so that if a website tries to figure out who you are, they can't do so. But websites developers are clever. It's the people that are trying to collect your privacy, your private information. And so they will look at things like, what model are you using? What screen size are you using? What fonts do you have installed? What plugins do you have installed? And by looking at all those things, they can say, piecing together all these things, hey, I think this is Brett
Yeah.
Burney. And so they're pretty smart at that. And so the newest versions of Safari is going to hide more of that stuff to make it harder for websites to know who you are. So that way, I mean, if you want to log into a website, that's your choice. But if you don't, you should be able to decide, hey, I'm not necessarily telling you who I am. So I sort of like that. That's a cool one that's behind behind the scenes rather. Another one that's interesting is called wired accessories permission.
Yeah.
And what this refers
Interesting.
to is if your phone is turned off, right? Your phone's locked and you plug a cord into it, does whatever's plugged into your device, can it talk to your device? Like it might be something you want
Hmm.
because maybe you're plugging it into your home computer to like transfer like a really big video file to your iPhone or iPad. But you'll be able to have I think it's an option, but that you can have the option that it will ask you, are you sure you want to share data with this device? Because it might be like maybe you're in an airport or something like that, and you think you're just plugging your iPhone into charge, and unbeknownst to you, some,
Yeah.
bad guy out there, some ne'er-do-well has some device that's going to try to read information off your iPhone. There's all these devices that, these hacking devices that connect, so, police departments sometimes use them that connect to an iPhone and try to read something off. And so this is just going to be a way that you'll be able to have one more barrier. It's not going to prevent everything, but it's one more thing of, are you sure that you actually want to share this? And I presume, I don't know from this post, is it authenticated, like maybe you have to use Face ID or your thumbprint or something like, but
Yeah.
somehow you need to authenticate, oh yeah, it's okay. Even though my iPhone is locked, you can let this cord get information from my phone. And so that's something that's like, it's not as obvious as the messages screening that we were talking about, but
Right. Right.
in some circumstances, it could lead to privacy. So every year, Apple tries to improve its privacy. These are some noticeable improvements that are coming soon.
I don't know if this is the same thing, but I usually see some form of a message like this when I plug my phone into an automobile, like a rental car.
Hmm.
A lot of times I can connect Bluetooth, but especially if I'm in a rental car, I don't want to add my phone as a Bluetooth phone in the
Hmm.
car just because I don't like to leave that. So I'll usually just use a regular cord, a physical cord. And when I do that, usually the phone is locked and it'll say, do you want to give permission
Yeah.
for this quote accessory to use the iPhone? And I always say yes because most of the time I do trust it. But I'm just was thinking about that when I read this story, like it would be something
Hmm.
similar. But again, some people look at this and say, well, that's another thing I got to tap. Okay. But what's the balance of that is the security, right? It's like it's more security, maybe a little bit less convenience. But I'm glad that Apple usually errs on this, at least to give you the ability to do that important stuff. Back in the day, at least, I always remembered when I got a friend on their phone or even a family member, and we would get them then on Instagram. And they'd be like, oh, this is great. I've got it on my phone. I'm going to go download the Instagram app on my iPad. And for how long, Jeff, have I had to say, well, actually, there's not an Instagram app for the iPad. And you leaked to a story from John Gruber at Daring Fireball this past week. Instagram finally launches an iPad app. What are we, 14 years late? on this.
15 years,
Just
yeah.
incredible.
Took them a little while to get around to that. You've been able to use the iPhone Instagram app on your iPad and just sort of blow it up, which is not
Yeah,
as good.
it looks
I
terrible.
was I
Yeah.
was an Instagram user. I used Instagram a lot when it first came out, and it was just people sharing cool pictures. I was into it. I'm not as big of an Instagram user nowadays, but I know a lot of people are. My wife, for example, that's like the number one way that she sort of finds out about things going on because she has such a great
Hmm.
curated list of everything from local stores to news sources and stuff. So like that is a big way that she finds out what's going on in the world. For me, it used to be Twitter way back when before Twitter. Nowadays it's Mastodon, but Mastodon's not the same because I don't have as many good news sources. Mastodon's pretty good for tech stuff, but not for like regular news. So, but like everybody, a lot of people have like their thing that they really use, whether it's for social communications or just for learning about things. But Instagram's a big one for a lot of people. I know that, and so thank goodness you'll be able to use an iPad app. I say thank goodness. There's an asterisk on that because
Right.
Instagram did not just come out with a version of the app that fits the iPad screen. I mean, it does fit the iPad screen and it's adjustable and stuff, which is good. But
Right.
when you turn it on, like the homepage default in the iPhone, as people know, is you see posts from people that you know. And then if you scroll down enough, there are some ads in there, of course, there are some promoted things. And then eventually, once you go through your new posts, they'll give you stuff. But at least in its core, you're basically seeing posts from people like Facebook or something, right? But in the iPad app, the home screen, what you get when you start, is not that. It's their thing called
Oh,
Reels, which is sort of like their version of TikTok where you see
gotcha.
videos.
Right. Right.
And it's not just Reels or stories. It's not just videos from the people you follow. It's videos from people like that the algorithm thinks you might want to watch. So when I first started the iPad app, I'm scrolling through and I'm like, I don't know who any of these people are. Like, what am I? This is not Instagram. What is
Who
this?
are these
And then
people?
I realized, oh, that's what's going on here. Now you can go to the tabs and you can switch over to the people that you follow or whatever. And so you can get to that screen. But as far as I can tell, I'm opening it up right now. Yeah, I just opened up the app again, and the home screen, I got something about some Trump talking. I don't want to see Trump talking to Mark Zuckerberg on my screen. And so I need to, which one of these things? Okay, so I clicked the one with the little people on it, which is called following. And now I am seeing the Instagram that I know. And I see,
That
my
you know.
nephew
Okay.
posted something and I see something from my daughter's school. And so this is what I expect to see. But you have to do something else to get to that screen, which is annoying. And I've heard some people say,
Yeah.
gosh, I hope Instagram doesn't change the iPhone app to do the same thing. I mean, are they
Right.
so jealous of TikTok's success that they're going to try
Right.
to imitate it and lose
No.
what makes Instagram Instagram? I don't know. So anyway, so
Yeah.
two steps forward, one step back. Right? Thank goodness we have an iPad app. Unfortunately, it's not what you necessarily were hoping for, but hey, 15 years later, we got something.
I usually call it like a native iPad app, right? Because I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
you've always been able to go to Instagram.com in a browser on your
that's true
iPad, right?
too. Yeah.
And you could have gone into that and you could have gone and look at your Instagram. In fact, I think that's how I typically would have done it just because I'm not on Instagram as much. But now it's something that runs natively on the iPad. And that's
Made for the
that's
iPad. Yeah.
yeah, that's helpful. Let's talk about another app from a dear friend of ours, David Sparks at MacSparky.com. We've known David for a long time, mainly because he used to be a practicing lawyer. He stopped doing that or retired from that several years ago and now has his own productivity lab. I think you're a member of his.
Mhm.
And I just have always enjoyed following him. He has always just been a wonderful thinker, especially on the productivity side. And he just recently, this week, launched his own app called The No List. And you have to read his blog post to really understand where this is coming from. But if you know David a little bit, then this to me just falls right in line with what he would offer.
Well, first of all, I know David enough that when I first saw him say he made an iPhone app, I'm like, you did what? I mean, I know you're not a lawyer anymore, but or at least not a practicing lawyer, but like now you're an app developer. And in
Right.
fact, there's an interesting story about that because although he knows a little bit about programming, he says that the new thing they talk about, the new thing the kids talk about is vibe coding, where you use
Vibe
AI to sort of
coding.
help you write your app. And he's like,
Right.
believe me, I wrote my app myself, but he says I use the AI to sort of as a sparring partner to sort of say, well, how could I do this? And it would say, well, maybe you could
Yeah.
do it this way, and then you would try something. And how would you improve that? And that's a good way to use AI. I mean, frankly, as a lawyer, I use some AI services in my practice. I will write my brief
Sure.
and then I'll say, well, what could we do here? And what improvements could I make? And it's a good way to have like a sparring partner. It's funny how he made it was interesting, but the idea of the app, this is just so on brand for David. He is so into personal productivity and maximizing your time and making sure that your time really counts, whether he's talking about scheduling apps or to-do apps or whatever. So this is almost the opposite of a to-do app. It's the
Right.
not going to do it app. And the idea is that people ask David, especially because he has some notoriety in the text field, people will say, would you do this? Do you want to do this? And, often he says no. And he thought, wouldn't it be interesting to track when I have said no, not as a negative thing, but just because that way in the future,
important.
his idea was if you start to track it, then maybe, months from now, when somebody asks you, would you like to do something? You're like, well, that would be interesting. But then you take a look at other things that you've said no to over the last 6 months. And you're like, well, this would not be as interesting as those other things I've said no to. And I'm really glad that I didn't, fill up my schedule, bog myself down by saying no to those other things. So maybe I should say no to this one. Or maybe you look at the other stuff and say, oh, wow, this is such a good opportunity, better than the things I've said no to. So it's a fascinating idea for the app. I downloaded it.
Yeah.
I don't know how often I will use it but believe me, there have been times where I have said no to things for a million different reasons. Sometimes a client even asked me to do something and I'm like, that's not really good. It's not a good fit for me. Yes, thank you for thinking of me, but no, thank you. And opportunities too. Sometimes people ask me to speak at something, and we all have things in our life that like you could do it. And if you had infinite time, it would be interesting to do it. But you don't have infinite time. And so you want to be appropriate with what you put your efforts towards. So I think it's a really fascinating idea for an app. Good luck to him. It's a free app. I don't think that there's any in-app purchases or anything like that. So I don't think he's going to become a millionaire on this. But so check it out if you think that this might have a place in your life. I will tell you that for an app developed by a lawyer, not somebody who was trained in computer science, I actually think it has a very clean look to it. It's a nice interface. So when I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, this looks like a good iPhone app. So so thank you. Bravo to David. Congratulations on your first step.
Like you, I've said no to several things, but I typically say no and then I move on and I just forget about them. And I think that's what enamored me about this. I haven't downloaded the app yet, Jeff, but just the fact that if I go back 2 or 3 months and say, oh yeah, you know what? I did say no to that speaking engagement and now there's something better. And I think that that's sort of the idea that he was going for. He says, here's one of the things that I've learned through all the years of helping people be more productive. The enemy of the essential is the good, but not great. Every yes to something good is a no to something potentially better. So the problem is when that shiny new opportunity presents itself, we've forgotten all the other shiny things that we've already said no to. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. The no list. We'll put a link in the show notes.
In fact, there's
somebody else that
phrase from Steve Jobs. Let me see. It's something like, I'm not going to. Okay. There was a quote by Steve Jobs. I think I just found it on the internet. It's, I'm as proud of the things we haven't done as the things I have done. Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. And famously, when Steve Jobs rejoined Apple in the 90s, Apple had so many different products, and he was like, we need to simplify things. He had that grid of 4 items. And of course, over time, they made more items. But, the idea is to really come up with great ideas. It's not just coming up with great ideas. It's saying no to things that might be pretty good, but they're not great. And so there's even like a very much of an Apple connection to you get greatness by saying no to certain things. So anyway, throw that out there.
Somebody else that's been writing some great stuff is Glenn Fleishman at 6 Colors. I'm so happy that he has teamed up with Jason and Dan over there. This was an interesting article, but I thought it was good that we could at least mention it here. Don't despair, depair. So it's a great story in here from a friend, another great journalist at Lex Friedman that's been around for a while. He bought some used AirPods Max, I think off of Amazon.
Right.
And apparently the former owner did not do what Apple goes through and tells you to do to remove the device from your iCloud account. I think I may be oversimplifying just a little bit.
No, you got it right.
But I know when you get rid of a phone or a Mac or so, they tell you go and unlink it from your iCloud account. And apparently it didn't. So Lex Friedman is now using these new to him used AirPods Max. And every time apparently that he connects, there's a message on his phone that says, this person is tracking you, or the original owner can track you, something along to that effect.
Yeah.
And so Glenn goes through and explains what he detailed to Lex on how to get rid of that. And it was a very simple fix. And I'm just glad that Glenn wrote about it too.
And I mean, Glenn Fleishman is a fantastic writer. He's always incredibly detailed, Jeopardy champion, by the way, super smart guy. But when he attacks a problem, I have respect for him, because this is the way that I tend to look at things. Don't just give the narrow answer, like look at the big picture, put it in context.
Yeah, the background.
So, ever since he started writing monthly articles for Six Colors, every one of them has just been great. And that's when this one too. Yeah. So yes, read the article and you'll find out how this problem was solved. But in the process, Glenn sort of goes through how Find My works, how the tracking systems work, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's a great primer, lots of details here that I didn't quite know about how the system works. So it's really nicely done. And this is even timely if we want to tie it back next week, because one of the rumors for next week is that either next week or some point before, Christmas this year, Apple is going to come out with new AirTags. One of the rumors being is that they'll have like a stronger version of the ultra wideband tracking or whatever it is, or Bluetooth tracking. So the idea is that you could be even further away from your AirTag and still see it, or you'll get even more precise information for tracking it down. Like, it's in my house, but where is it? I can't find my such and such. And so this is not a bad time for any of us to be sort of reminding ourselves on how the Find My network works, because there's a good chance on Tuesday Apple may enhance it. So fantastic article, really good.
Yeah, good stuff. And it was as simple as, I think he had Lex go into the Find My app, remove the AirPods that he had already paired, and then repaired them. I mean, I really think that's pretty much all that he did. But at least it cut off that previous relationship with the former owner, apparently, is what it did. And so obviously Lex was pretty happy about that it fixed it there. Yeah, good stuff. Another quick article we can just address quickly. I don't know how many people would be interested in Apple's Numbers software. So in our world, Jeff, we talk a lot, or work a lot, with Microsoft Office, right? So we have Word, we have PowerPoint, and we have Excel. But some folks may not know, Apple has Pages, they have Keynote, and they have Numbers, which kind of correspond a little bit to the Microsoft Office on there. And I always tell people, I always use Microsoft Word. I rarely ever use Pages. I will flip back and forth between PowerPoint and Keynote, and then I almost always use Numbers and never Microsoft Excel. Now, that's just my little personal world. So I was thrilled to see this little article in Apple Insider from William Gallagher about where Apple's Numbers software excels a little bit to Microsoft Excel, or where Microsoft Excel is a bit better. Honestly, you can't get away from Excel. You got to have Excel, I think, for any time that you need to open it. But for me, most of the time, if I get what's also known as a CSV file, a comma separated file, value, that's a version that can open up in Excel, but it looks so much better in Microsoft Numbers. So this was just if you ever work with Numbers versus Microsoft Excel, this is a fantastic article that I'll include in the show notes that you can read through.
Yeah. If you was to compare sort of the big, the big Microsoft apps and the Apple versions, the one where Apple, I think, is clearly better is Keynote versus PowerPoint. I just prefer everything about Keynote versus PowerPoint.
Oh, I do too.
Yes. Even when I have to make PowerPoint presentations because I'm required to use it, I will make a Keynote presentation at the very end, export to PowerPoint. So it's clearly better. On the bottom end, you have Pages and Word. Word, in my mind, is way, way better. There are some times that I will use Apple's Pages app, mainly if I want to do some specific placing of images on a page that might be a little bit easier, designing, right? That sometimes I prefer Pages, but it's really rare for me. It does happen, but it's pretty rare for me to use Pages over Word. And then in the middle, you have Mail versus Outlook, and you have Numbers versus Excel. Because when it comes to spreadsheets, I mean, Microsoft Excel, that is what everybody uses, especially if you're if you're an accountant or something, of course you use Excel. I'm not. As a lawyer, I do use spreadsheets sometimes, not a lot, but but absolutely do use them for several things. Sometimes to calculate things, like, judicial interest in a tort lawsuit, or sometimes just to sort of organize things the way that you can organize things in tables and rows. And I will sometimes use Excel. Excel is more powerful than Numbers. But to be honest, Brett, the features that Excel supports that Numbers doesn't are features that are way above my head anyway. For the stuff I'm going to use, like adding and multiplication, they both have that.
Yes,
but
exactly.
and summing things. But when it comes to design, although I know that there are people that are really powerful with Excel and they can do some cool designs with it, I just find it so much easier to have a design that looks good in numbers.
Yeah.
And so I will tell you, it depends on the task, but I probably use numbers a little bit more than Excel. And again, spreadsheets
Yeah.
aren't a big part of my life, but just because the end result looks a little bit better, and also I think it's a little bit more approachable. But again, it's not uniform, so that's close. I mean, just to wrap things up between Mail and Outlook, that's an interesting one because like I'm so happy to the way that the Apple Mail app works on the iPhone and the iPad.
Yeah.
But when it comes to a computer, Outlook, and for me, it's not really a choice because I mostly use Outlook on my PC, where my office computer, where Apple's Mails app is not an option. But Outlook has just so much plug-in support and other things that it supports. So but it's nice that we have these two big companies in our lives that have competing versions. And back to this story, I think that it does. William does a nice, good job of saying, here's where Excel is better, and it really is
Yeah.
better in a lot of ways. But there are ways that numbers is better too. And so it's useful for him to do it. So if spreadsheets are a part of your life, and if you just currently use Excel, take a look at numbers. It's pretty good. Or if you just use numbers, Excel's got some good stuff too.
Something you just mentioned that I want to highlight quickly is Apple's apps can open the files from Microsoft. And so a lot of times, to your point that you just said, I'll create a keynote presentation knowing that the people I'm sharing the presentation with don't have a Mac. They have PowerPoint, but I'll still use Keynote to create it. And then I'll do file save as or export as a PowerPoint. And Jeff, it looks good. Like I'm always nervous just because of our history, right? I'm like, well, the formatting is going to be off. And sometimes there's a few little kinks in there, but for the most part, it looks great. And in the same way, I might use numbers to modify or edit an Excel spreadsheet because I like numbers better, but I will save it as an Excel spreadsheet to share it. Or on the flip side, if somebody sends me a PowerPoint, I will right click on that on the Mac and I will say open with Keynote. So you can't go the other way. Like Microsoft doesn't open Keynote presentations. It doesn't open Pages files, but you can. Apple, I thought, has always done a really good job of at least doing that. And I think that comes from this, back in the day when we had to be compatible on some of the file formats, and William Gallagher goes into that a little bit here on the cross-platform problems as well. So that's good stuff there. You linked to an interesting little router from Eero, E-E-R-O. You've reviewed Eero. Is it Eero? The Wi-Fi
routers.
mesh. Yeah, Wi-Fi routers. But this is interesting. I've never seen this, and I just wanted to highlight it just quickly. The new Eero Signal promises to keep you connected even during internet outages. And this is a big deal for me. And it sounds like from your post today, you've experienced this sometimes, that the power might be on, we might be fine, but for some reason the internet goes out. And honestly, Jeff, when that has happened in my house, what do? We just switch over to using our phone hotspots. This Eero Signal apparently has a SIM card inside the router so that it just automatically switches over for you when your internet goes down. And I don't know how good this works. I just think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and it's such a clever idea because the way it works is when you have the Eero devices, the device is plugged into like a power support, right? A power source. And ideally, you'll have multiple Eeros in your house to create the mesh network. So if I understand correctly, you simply take one of those Eero devices, whichever one is like it's closest to get the best cell phone signal, and you take the power cord at the back of the device, you unplug it from the Eero. You plug it into this thing called the Eero Signal, and then the cord goes from there back into the device. So it just goes in your network, right? So it's just one more part there. So you'll have two devices next to each other, like you're showing in the picture here.
Gotcha.
And then the Eero Signal detects when your Wi-Fi drops. And if it detects it, it just automatically starts using the built-in SIM card. There's a 4G version and there's a 5G version. And then it just continues to provide your internet just using wireless, which, depending upon the type of internet connection, it might not be as fast, but it's pretty fast. I mean, I can still get at my house, I can certainly get LTE, that's at least 100, megs a second, whatever the thing is. So it's pretty good. It may not be the gigabyte that I have with cable modem. So it's enough to keep going. And it solves, sometimes it'll be like a Friday night and my wife and I are watching the TV and there's nothing wrong with like, you're just getting to the exciting point of the show. and then the internet drops. You're like, oh, come
Boom.
on. Like, and you never know, am I down for 1 minute? Am I down for 20 minutes? It's just, and there's
Yeah.
nothing you can do
Yeah.
about it. You can try to call the cable company, but
Yeah,
it's
but
always,
everybody's
it's going to
calling.
come
Yeah.
back whenever it comes back is the bottom line. But so with this, and again, so I think it's a really nice idea. Now there's a cost because the device itself costs either 100 or $200, depending on if you get the
Yeah.
4G or 5G version. And then you have to pay for a service. And so one service they offered is $100 a year, and it gives you 10 gigs of data a year. Now, I haven't done the math. Like when I typically have my power outages of hopefully no more than 5 or 10 or 20 minutes, once a month or something like that, does that add up to more than 10 gigs over a year? I
Right.
don't know. And then if you want to pay $200 a year, then you get a service that has 100 gigabytes, not a year, but a month. So that's like a huge increase. I mean, that's 10 times as much, whatever, more than that. So depending upon what solution. But I mean, if you want to throw money at this problem, $100 up front and
That's one way
$100
to
a
do it. Right.
year, if it's worth you to have $200, you're not going to have those outages. You're just going to continue to use the internet. You probably won't even notice that it went down. And then when the Wi-Fi, when the regular cable modem comes back on, or whatever source you have for your internet, it'll come back on. So I think it's clever. Maybe there's been another device out there in the past that does the same thing, but I haven't seen one before. So when I
Yeah.
saw that this was just announced, I'm like, wow, this is intriguing, really.
Arrow, they are Amazon. Is that right? Is that the
Amazon
Amazon?
purchased them years
Okay.
ago. In
Okay.
fact,
Yeah.
that's a
Okay.
whole nother story that Apple looked at
Yeah.
buying Eero way back when, and I so wish Apple had done so, but regardless.
So wish.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, we are very excited that next week we might hear about a brand new iPhone, but I thought this was good in the name of well-being and wellness, Jeff. This was a good article from the New York Times. Hopefully I can get it to come up here. Here it is. And I think that you provided us a gift link. So
I
thank
did.
you as
So
always.
everybody can open it, even if you don't subscribe.
How to break free from your phone. And, we've seen some of these. It's like put the phone down, no blue light before sleeping, all that kind of stuff. We hear about that almost to the point where it's almost we ignore it. And many of us, I feel like, I think can justify the fact that we need to have the phone with us. Maybe I'm just trying to have a cop out. But I thought several of these were a very nice little quick hits on what other people have done to find a way to put down the phone. So thank you for sharing this.
Yeah, some of them were simple, like the one you just scrolled by. Don't use your phone on Saturdays and Sundays. I mean,
Right.
yeah, I guess whatever.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. But one of them I thought was a little clever is we all know that social media is both good and a total time suck that rots your brain, right? We all know that. But one person's suggestion was don't cut off social media, but limit yourself that you only use, Instagram or, TikTok, whatever it is, only use it on a computer. So that if you're in front of your computer, you can use it, you
That's
can
right.
use social media, but
I think
don't
that's
have
great.
the app on your iPhone or your iPad. And so that way you're still using it, but not as much. And so that's not a bad selection. Another one was to delete. They called it, I think, sort of, delete some of these apps that just love to suck. Well, actually, that was that
slot
one.
machine. Yeah.
But I think another suggestion was, get rid of some of those apps that just encourage you to to buy one more set of pills or one more set of whatever. These games that are just sort of,
Right.
yeah. I mean, we know they're fun to play, but they do sort of they're addictive. So again, I personally use my iPhone all the time. And when I first saw this article, I'm like, I'm not looking to use my iPhone less. But then I read it anyway, and I'm like, yeah, there's actually some
good things to keep in mind
here
on there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I like how we're going to transition to this story about Apple Arcade. So maybe delete some of those games that are going. But to be fair, when Apple Arcade was introduced, apparently 6 years ago, and I love how Jason, you linked to a story here, or Dan Moore was talking about how it's almost like kind of forgotten. I mean, like he says, I get it as part of my Apple One subscription. I rarely ever open some of these Apple apps, but I did like the idea, and I still do like the idea, because I know that when I get an app from Apple Arcade, it has, I guess, what I would call been vetted. So that, Jeff, I know I'm not going to get ridiculous ads. I'm not going to get, the video pop-ups in the middle of the game or something like that to tempt me to tap away somewhere else. And they're very good games. And I just like how Dan talked about the fact that I don't know that many people are taking better advantage of it, including me.
Yeah, and I agree with you. You've hit there's two good things about Apple Arcade. Number one is that the games tend to be pretty good, and sometimes they're not new games. Sometimes it'll be a game that's already out there that you could pay for, and then Apple will tell the developer, hey, if you make this part of Apple Arcade, take out all of the in-app purchase things, and it'll just be a part of our service. So the fact that they put it in here means it's a good app. And then, as I just alluded to, when an app is on Apple Arcade, they will never ask you to buy more coins, to pay for upgrades, to add on, custom avatars. It's just all included. And so, yes, it is $5 a month. In the very beginning, I used to say, because I'm not a huge game person, and so I'm like, I would never pay $5 a month for it, but I like that I like that it's part of Apple One. I've now gotten to the point that I don't know if for some reason it was on its own, I might still pay for it because like there's a lot of interesting casual games. Like I was mentioning in my post today, there was one that came out this week called Jeopardy Daily, which I'm not like I'm not like a religious watcher of Jeopardy, but I've certainly seen it over the years, and the idea of trivia games is cute, and it's a nicely done. You feel like you're playing Jeopardy. There's a version of it that has like the category of the day, and it'll be, potent potables, whatever it is going to be. And then like it'll have like the 100, 200, 300, and you go through and you can either have the hard version where you type in your answer like it would be on the show, or you can have the easy version, which is what I did, where it's like a multiple choice. And it's just a fun little, again, each game takes maybe a minute to play, 2 minutes to play, but it's fun and I'm not paying extra for it. And I know there's not going to be any pop-up ads or come-ons to pay more money. And I will play the game, and I think it's good. I the ones, two of them in there that I really like, I think they both come from the same developer. Good Sudoku and Flip Flop are both games that I sometimes play. So, if I'm going to play like a casual little game, I'm going to probably play an Apple Arcade game. So, and Dan criticizes Apple because we all know that, especially on the Mac, Apple has just not had the big marquee games. Sometimes they will convince a publisher, pay the publisher, I don't know how they do it, and have some specific titles. But we all know that if you really are a hardcore gamer, you need to have like, one of the PlayStation devices or a PC or just something like that. You just need to. But there are certainly pretty good games. So, people can talk about, and is it Apple's fault? Or is Apple so small on the computer side that developers don't want to pay attention to Apple? It's a chicken egg thing as to who's at fault for not having better games on the Mac. For me, they're good enough games on the Mac because I don't do a lot of games on the Mac. But I do like games on the iPhone sometimes, and Apple Arcade's a good place to go. So and as you started to say, Brett, it's been 6 years. I would not have guessed it's been 6 years since Apple Arcade came out.
Has Apple actually developed a game at all? Or do they mostly just work with other game publishers in there?
They work with publishers, and that was part of the selling. That was part of their shtick in the beginning. Is we are not going to make our own games and compete with you. We're going to support developers, sometimes independent developers, sometimes big houses, and so
which I like.
Which is good. Yeah. So there's no. I don't think that there's anyone who works for Apple and who makes games. I put an asterisk on that. There actually have been over the years one or two Apple game developers that have become Apple employees, and I think they've brought the apps in-house. But that's not really what Apple Arcade is about. Apple Arcade is just about finding good apps or creating good apps from scratch. But we're going to pay developers to make something good or to port something good, and then we're going to release it as part of the service.
And I get all of that, and I support all of that. But once upon a time, Apple didn't make television shows or movies either. And so when I looked at this story, that was one of the things that hit me, Jeff. It's like, is there, I mean, I know that Apple has talked about this and they've just decided it's maybe not worthwhile for the majority of reasons you're talking about, because it is a different form of entertainment. But Apple TV Plus has really gone very well. And it makes me sit there and wonder, like, there could be a talent pool that Apple could either have right now or acquire that could make some pretty good, simple games, right? That could do something. Anyway, just my thought. Like, I feel like if that could be something, because Apple TV, if you go on Apple TV Plus, they still, provide, movies and series, from other places, but obviously their own homegrown content is coming on strong. Anyway, just a kind of a thought that I had on that, which would be good. Let's do a quick In the Vision, because we haven't talked about it in a long time. This was a great little article from the Wall Street Journal you linked to about the Apple Vision Pro being used in some other business niches. Niches? I think they specifically talked about doctors and no, I'm sorry. This was pilots and home improvement stores. Am I right on that? It was just kind of cool because I know we've talked about some of these places and we talked about doctors. That's why it was top of mind before. But just the fact that it could be used in pilot training, airline pilot training, that could be pretty cool too.
The idea of the article was interesting, that it's perhaps too expensive for many consumers, but in businesses where you can justify higher expenses, it makes more sense. So I liked the title of the article. I agree with you. When
Yes.
you read the substance of it, which as a reminder, even if you don't subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, you can open it up talking about Apple One. You can open it up in the Apple News service, which is how I'm looking at it right now. But the actual examples they use, there's not a ton of them. Like you said, they talked about the one about, Lowe's has it, and they have this French industrial software company that uses it and stuff. There's not a ton of it. I thought there'd be more interesting examples here.
I did too.
But it is an
Yeah.
interesting idea that like it does make sense that, for business usage, you can justify the cost more easily. I so look forward to the day when I can say lawyers should really be using a Vision Pro or future generations of
Right.
it. I did a whole session on this at Tech Show last year, as
Yes,
you
you
know.
did.
And although it's not quite there yet, I do think that all of the building blocks are there. Like in the future, hopefully the near future, we're going to have a future generation of the Vision Pro that's going to work better for the things that lawyers need it. It's going to be cheaper. And I do think there's no doubt in my mind it's coming. I just don't know if it's coming in 1 year
Agreed.
or 10 years, but it's absolutely coming. And it might be, maybe this Wall Street Journal article is correct, that it may be that there are some business areas where it really starts to take off and then it trickles down more to consumers. We'll see.
Any Vision Pro announcements expected next week, Jeff?
No,
Have
I
we
don't
seen
think so.
anything? I don't think
No,
so either.
the rumors that they're going to come out with like a next generation Vision Pro that has a better processor in it,
Right.
which is probably not even as much to improve the speed as it is that Apple just, it's just cheaper for them to use one of their processors. And
Yeah.
so just the next version they make, and that may come out this year. I don't know. And then the other rumor though is that Apple wants to come out with like the cheaper version of the Vision Pro, maybe just called the Vision instead of the Vision Pro. But all of the rumors say that that's still at least another year or two away. So we'll see.
I got a new segment for you. In the car.
In the car.
Let's talk about
Beep, beep.
CarPlay. We talk about that quite. Thank you. Ooh, that's good. I'll have a little soundbite in there. We talked about CarPlay, but also CarPlay Ultra, which heretofore has only been available on a very specific model of an Aston Martin and a very expensive
Which
model.
you went out and bought right away. Am I right? Or did I remember that?
I've got two actually since we
Two,
talked
of course. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
this was a great article about Hyundai, so not quite the same level as Aston Martin, coming out with their electric Ioniq, Ioniq cars that is actually going to have CarPlay Ultra in there. And I like this is from BBC Top Gear, not typically a blog that you follow, Jeff, but I'm just guessing you saw the mention of Apple CarPlay Ultra in here, and I'm glad that they put it in as one line because that is pretty interesting and just makes me happy that more car manufacturers are adopting CarPlay Ultra.
Yeah, we haven't had the official announcement from Hyundai yet, but this article seems pretty certain. And I don't think that Hyundai closes, they don't hold their secrets to their vest quite as much as a company like Apple does. But the reason for this is apparently on Tuesday, September 9th, the same day that we're talking about the Apple announcement, there's also going to be a big annual car show that's in Munich, Germany. And so a bunch of manufacturers will show some of their future automotive technology. And so this article says that for sure, Hyundai is going to announce their new EV car. And then I also linked to another article from Zach Hall, 9 to 5 Mac. I think his is more just speculation that there could be others that do so as well. CarPlay Ultra is interesting because it does take over your dashboard in a way that I think is good. I would want my CarPlay display to take over my entire dashboard. For so many reasons. I prefer the CarPlay interface, and that way, as CarPlay improves throughout the year, my car gets better, as opposed to right now when you buy a car, nothing changes in the navigation system or anything else. So there's no way that it can improve over time. So I like the idea of CarPlay Ultra, but apparently many manufacturers are leery of giving Apple the ability to control interfaces. They're like, oh no, we want to control our interface. So, that's a give and take. So the support for CarPlay Ultra has been slow, obviously. I mean, it was just announced earlier this year, but I think it's going to be slow. But over time, there will be more. There will be more. And so it will certainly be nice when you at least have a choice that's not the Aston Martin. Nothing against the Aston Martin. I'm sure it's a beautiful car. Not one will ever own in my life. On the other hand, will I ever own a Hyundai? What is it called?
Ioniq.
Ioniq?
Ioniq
Maybe,
Q.
maybe. I mean, I do think my next car is going to be an EV car, and maybe I used to own a Hyundai a long time ago when I was back when Hyundai first came out with their cars, the Hyundai XL, which was like our super cheap car that I could afford
Yep.
when I was a law student and had no money. That was my car, was a Hyundai XL. So I have been a Hyundai owner in the past.
I just like the fact that whether or not it has CarPlay Ultra may be a deciding factor for you. Because
Oh
I know
yeah,
that it would be for me. Like
absolutely.
I would look at that a little more seriously, even if it had a few more flaws, just because it actually offered CarPlay Ultra. Let's end within the show, which is a quick one because
Show.
I cannot wait. I even told my wife already because we
Hey.
are excited and waiting, not just for September 9th next week, but September 24th is when the 5th season of Slow Horses comes out. And oh boy, the trailer looks so good. I'm glad you linked to it. There's even, I told my wife, there's a Ted Lasso cameo. And now it's not Ted, but it's the Wonder Kid. It's actually right. He's in it now, and I mean that's
Yeah.
just great. I like to see those streams kind of, in my head, kind of weirdly cross each other.
I love the show Slow Horses so much that I almost
Yes,
did not include this video today. And the reason for that is that sometimes when I totally love a show and I know I'm going to watch it, I don't even watch the trailer because I'm like, I don't want
I
any
know, I
risk of
know,
spoilers. And
right?
yet I'm at the same time, I'm so excited about the show that I couldn't help myself. And so I figured I would link to it and let people decide whether they watch it or not. Because I will tell you that when you watch it, I mean, you just gave a tiny one away, but like there are definitely things in this trailer that I'm like, oh, okay. So that tells me a little bit. But then again, I have such confidence in this
Oh
show
yeah,
being good
oh
that
yeah,
even if I'm excited by some teaser, previews, I have no doubt that the show is going to be great. I mean, just looking at Gary Oldman's face, on that screen,
I know,
he
I know.
is so fantastic in this role that I cannot wait. So I love Slow Horses. And for those of you out there that have never watched the show before, boy, do you have a treat
Oh,
because there are
go start.
4 fantastic seasons to watch. Each one of them's not that long, not that many episodes, and they're all great. And I'm so excited.
It's funny you say that because when I told my wife this morning that's coming out, she's like, okay, well, that'll be a good fun weekend because she's like, there's only like 8 shows. And of course, you can't stop not watching the
Yeah.
next one. And
Hmm.
because there's only so few of them, it's like we finish them in one weekend. And then that's almost disappointing too because I'm like, come
Hmm.
on, we need a little bit more.
Oh, great show.
In the know.
In the know.
Uh, my tip can be pretty quick because it's a great tip, but I wouldn't recommend really anybody do it. How's that for selling it on there?
There you go.
But I was looking in my phone today, and most people probably know when there is an update available for your iPhone. And this is going to next week when we anticipate that Apple will fully release for the public consumption iOS 26. But if you go into your iPhone, you go into your settings, you go into general, there is actually a software update option there, right? And if you've got an update, typically you'll see like a little red one badge or something there that tells you that there is an update. But I noticed when I looked at mine, there's 2 lines when I go into that. One says automatic updates, and you can turn that off and on. And underneath mine, it says beta updates. And right now I have it turned off. But I looked at like my son's iPhone this morning, and he only has the first one, the automatic updates. And I just wanted to find out why. Now, I don't recommend that anybody get the public beta of iOS 26 yet. I mean, you could, if you've waited this long, you can wait another 1 or 2 weeks right now
Hmm.
because we anticipate it'll be available next week anyway. And even then, you may want to hold off on there. But if you have an extra iPhone or even an extra iPad and you want to do this, this is a good way that you can go in. We've talked about the fact that there is a public beta now in addition to the developer beta. Most people listening to this are probably not developers, so you wouldn't be interested in that. But the public beta means that it's good enough. At least there's still maybe some things to work out, but you can go in. Here's a picture of what I was talking about: the automatic updates versus the beta updates. If you want to actually try the beta update, if you do want to do this, don't recommend it necessarily. You first have to actually go to, I think it's beta.apple.com, right? It's this website, and you actually have to use your iCloud account to log in and tell Apple you want to be part of the beta software program. So this is kind of a two-step process on there. You go in and you basically, it links your iPhone to the beta software. And then when you do that, you can then go into your general settings, the software update, and then you will see this option right here that iDownload blog here has. You'll see beta updates, and then you can go in and you can pick if you want the, I think right now there's 4 of them. There's the iOS 26 developer beta, and then there's a public beta, and then 2 others in there. Don't totally recommend it, but I'm just saying for those of the folks that if you're interested right now and you want to try a developer beta or even a public beta right now, that is how you would turn that on. So it's kind of that two-step process. Go in, sign up for the beta program at Apple. That's beta.apple.com. And then once you log in with your iCloud account, it will then be linked with your phone, and then you can have the option to download those betas. Don't do it, but that's a good option. It's one option, just in case you were wondering.
And I'm glad you're mentioning it now, because if you have done it, keep in mind that we're going to have the final versions of iOS 26 probably in a week or so, right? But one thing to keep in mind is that if you're on the beta train, so to speak, you stay on that train even after the big release comes out. And so, because we're going to have iOS 26.0, but there's going to be a 0.0.1 and a 0.1 and all those sorts of things. And so just make the decision, even if you used the like the only beta that I've been on is for my Apple Vision Pro this summer, but you need to remind yourself, turn off beta updates once the final version comes out. I mean, if you want to, or at least think about if you want to do this, because like I'm going to want to stay on the final solid shipping version of Apple Vision Pro OS 26 for a long time throughout the year. I'm not going to want the beta updates, for the next 8 and 9 months, whatever. Now, next year when WWDC comes out and there's the new version, iOS 27, whatever, then maybe I'll get on it again. So just keep that in mind that, you've just described, Brett, how you want to turn it on. But then if you want to keep it on, like if you want to get the beta versions of the 0.1, the 0.2, great. But otherwise you should don't forget to turn it off and go back. So.
Great point. Yeah, because I didn't mention that. When you go into the beta updates at the very top, the very first option is off. So if you ever have turned beta updates on, to your point, and you're on that beta train because you're always on it, this is also how you would go and turn that off so that you wouldn't get those automatic updates. Thanks, Jeff. I'm glad that you clarified that.
Yeah. My tip today is just sort of a simple one, and it has to do with, I want to say HomeKit. Apple doesn't really use the word HomeKit as much anymore. They now just talk about the Home app, because not only does it support the HomeKit protocol, but also the Matter protocol, which one day may all be the same. But regardless, the issue is when you have accessories in your smart home, a light, a fan, or whatever it is, when you come up with a name for it, you may be tempted to come up with a name that's obvious. I'll give you an example. My living room has a fan. It will not surprise you that the name of my living room is Living Room when it comes to the Home app. And the name of that fan is, you guessed it, Fan. And that works okay, because I can tell, who, turn on the living room fan, and that works just fine.
Right.
But I have found that sometimes for some lights, especially, it doesn't actually work very well, or at least it's hard to do. I'll give you an example. In our bedroom, we have 2 lamps, on bed stands. And like, what do you call it? Is one the left lamp or the right lamp, or lamp 1, lamp 2, all those sorts of things. And so what I have found that is sometimes for an accessory in HomeKit/Matter, whatever, it works best if you come up with something totally unique for those names.
Okay.
And I've mentioned some of these in the past, but just in case you don't remember, like one that worked really well for me years and years ago is I put in a little device to plug in my Christmas tree during Christmas season years ago. And so I called that the tree, makes sense. But then I no longer, after Christmas season ended, I started using that for some lamps. But that was just such a unique word. There was nothing else in my house called tree when it comes to the HomeKit. And so my wife and I just said, my kids, just turn on the tree. There's no tree there. It just turns on some lamps, but we know that. And then it became even more confusing last year, because we actually did get a Christmas tree in another part of the house, and we plugged that into a smart connector, and we called that one Christmas. So turn on Christmas, but turn on the tree, but turn on tree would not turn trees on the, but the point was
Okay,
that you want to have a
I'm
unique name.
confused.
And likewise, the lamps in our bedroom, I decided, I don't know, on a whim to call one of them, I was thinking of the Flintstones. I called one Fred, you can guess, that's on my side, and Wilma, that's on my wife's side of the room. And but I just say, turn on Fred, and instantly it knows what light, what accessory I'm turning about. And
Okay.
I get much more accurate results than saying, turn on the bedroom, because then what bedroom you're talking about? The kid's bedroom, my bedroom, which lamp you're talking about? And so when you're adding accessories, no matter what they are, to your smart home, think about coming up with a clever, unique name, because if you do, usually if it's a really unique name, it's going to be easier to remember anyway. So that's like an advantage of it. Plus, I find that SIRI works a lot better when you're telling it to turn things on if you have a name that's really unique. So that's my advice, is come up with a unique name for naming your home accessories.
And you just go into the home app, and when you tap on that accessory, I'm assuming there's like a rename function or
that's exactly how it works.
Right?
You just rename. And I find that if you do have to, like, if you come up with a clever name from the beginning, you're golden. But if you change the name of something, which I've done before, like I would have a name and I realize, gosh, this is not working. I'm telling who to turn it on, and it's turning on a different one. I got to come up with a better, more unique name. You go in and you change it. And then I've noticed that after you change it, sometimes you need to wait a few minutes for it to sort of populate throughout your system. Certainly by the next day, it'll all be done, maybe even by the next hour. But you just give it a little time for everybody to understand that new name, and then eventually it gets there.
Man, this was a long show, and we haven't even had an Apple announcement. How crazy is it going to be next week? But it's going to be fun. I'm excited, and I'm glad we were able to cover a lot of this stuff, because I know next week we're pretty much going to be talking about the Apple event, even though you're going to have to miss some of it. Those poor judges. I wish they would just understand how important that this is going to be. But good luck on your hearing.
Thank
you. And we'll definitely talk with you next week, Jeff. Thanks as always.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.